And I look at money laundering, I look at what goes on today. You know, this part of the world, it's a relationship-driven culture, right? If you can't create a relationship with your target, he's not going to talk to you.
For years, Bill Micah has worked in the shadows. As an undercover operative for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, his stock in trade was danger and deception.
If you're good at it, it's a calling, you know. I think with all of it, you know, you get a little bit addicted to it.
So being an undercover in itself... In one operation with the FBI, he infiltrated drug networks linked to the bloodthirsty Colombian cocaine cartels.
Well, it had its moments, for sure, especially when you know that there's an automatic $100,000 hit on your life if they discover who you are.
Now, Bill Micah is cashing in on his 22 years in law enforcement and his vast networks of contacts in financial crime.
I got a call from a banker in Hong Kong who said, you know, how would you like to come to Hong Kong and set up an international banking platform for us? Our primary clients are Chinese state-owned enterprises, and so they want to make sure that what they do keeps them compliant. And so that ultimately is how I came to Hong Kong when I left the Mounties.
A lot of construction still going on here.
Yeah, it never stops.
Yeah.
Never stops.
Here, on the border between Hong Kong and China, you can see how the communist state has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty and made many others very rich.
Interesting. That over there, 25 years ago, was a fishing village. That's all it was. China, when it led to its creating these special economic zones, Shenzhen was one of those zones. Today, it is a city of 12 million people.
But this isn't just a border for people and trade. It's a pipeline for billions flowing out of China, legitimately and illegally.
The vast majority of people over the age of 45, 50, they grew up during the Cultural Revolution. They understand the powers of the state and that what I have today could be gone tomorrow. And so there's always that sense that if I can at least get my wealth out of China, or at least internationalize it outside of China, I protected my family for future use of that money.
From his Hong Kong base, Bill Micah runs Amida, a firm that works with corporations and governments to recover allegedly stolen money and assets. He is, in his own words, an economic mercenary.
As long as the claim is valid, as long as we're doing everything lawful and properly, yeah, I'm a hired gun to help either large corporates or governments to get back what is rightfully theirs.
And is the Chinese government one of those people who've hired your gun, so to speak?
I gotta be careful what I say here, but I have a commercial relationship with entities that are themselves associated in some form or another with policing authorities in China, and a big part of their mandate is focused on economic crime, financial crime, money laundering.
Hong Kong lawyer Conrad Won is also a hired gun. He works with Bill Micah and the Chinese authorities to recover assets and money allegedly stolen from the state. Conrad Won says in the last decade alone, China has been stripped of $1.6 trillion by criminals, corrupt officials and fraudsters.
The mainland Chinese police is willing to work with any agency in overseas to locate the people and also locate the assets.
Conrad Won's investigations take him all around the world, tracking the flow of illicit funds coming out of China.
I'm giving the legal advice for them. One of the advice is about how to trace back the money in different countries and how to enforce the judgment to overseas, the Chinese judgment in overseas.
Hong Kong is the funnel for billions of hot money coming in from the mainland. It's not a new phenomenon. For decades, some of the world's biggest money launderers have used this place as a base to wash the globe's dirty cash.
Once the money's in Hong Kong, then you can do what you want with it. Although Hong Kong is part of China, once money from the mainland is in Hong Kong, it's effectively overseas because there are no exchange controls in Hong Kong. This is a visualization of a complex international criminal network.
Like Bill Micah, former cop Julian Russell is now a private operator in Hong Kong, doing business intelligence work for corporations and governments.
The perpetrators of the crime. What we do in the private sector, we've done for many years and have developed networks of people and sources of information and experience in solving these international crimes. That's something most police forces do not do very well.
Everyone agrees Australia is an attractive destination for money flowing out of China.
Most Chinese people will believe that Australia is a good place and more safe place to hidden their money. One of the critical reasons is there's a low successful case for the Australian government to send back any criminal from Australia to China by using the mutual assistance orders. So for this reason, they believe that no one can catch the Chinese criminal in Australia.
I think Australia is attractive for receiving Chinese ill-gotten gains for a couple of very simple reasons. Money is a coward. Money doesn't go where there's conflict. Money doesn't go where there's ambiguity. What does Australia represent? Well, Australia represents rule of law. It represents a stable banking system.
It's no secret that China wants its money back. In 2014, it launched Operation Fox Hunt, a targeted mission to track and repatriate Chinese nationals accused of illegally funneling billions out of the country, including alleged fugitives in Australia.
There's been a great deal of success with it. So out of the top 100 targets, I think about 60 have been recovered now, and that's what the Chinese are claiming.
Former AFP officer John Coyne says Fox Hunt's critics are concerned it has been used as a political weapon to purge opponents of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Fugitives have also been pressured to return home because of threats against family members in China.
It seems there's more than enough evidence that at least in jurisdictions like Australia, the US and America, coercive tactics were used to force people to return back to China.
If you are suspicious, even if you have been previously suspicious, report it. We're here all to help catch bad guys.
Neil Jeans runs a firm that advises big corporates around the world on how to comply with anti-money laundering laws.
I think it's been well understood for a number of years that Australia has been a target location for hot money, particularly coming out of China. And we've seen that activity increase exponentially over the last number of years. And that creates a problem for Australia, which is that hot money is transitory. It will be here today and potentially gone tomorrow. And that then creates dislocations in the legitimate economy.
This has become a familiar scene to people in China.
The Chinese president has now launched Phase 2 of his repatriation and recovery program, an operation codenamed Skynet.
China's Operation Skynet has brought home 3,051 fugitives and recovered close to 9 billion yuan.
So Skynet was a much broader and much more extensive activity than its predecessor, Fox Hunt. And there was a dual focus really with Skynet, which was get the money back, get the people back.
天网恢恢，虽远必追。
Last month, Chinese state media aired a documentary about Skynet's progress and how authorities are tracking fugitives around the world.
业后在非洲落网，这些案件也
The message: no matter where you flee, China's so-called pursuit teams will find you.
推动了制度化建设进程。
What we've seen with Skynet is a far more systemic and structured and targeted approach, but with a far wider net.
Now, China is employing other means to pursue its missing billions, economic bounty hunters, and it's engaging them around the world. Do you think Chinese authorities are operating in Australia covertly to try to get that money back?
Certainly, from my experience, yes. I think there are activities going on. They are covert. They are all about applying pressure to people, particularly people that have families back in the country.
Bill Micah is one of these private operatives. He's been engaged by a company in Hong Kong working with China's powerful Ministry of Public Security to track and recover alleged hot money, including in Australia.
We know how to operate more clearly, I think, than a country like China or personnel from China in our own jurisdictions. We have familiarity.
Such as Australia.
Such as Australia. There's a huge opportunity to develop and exploit this business channel, especially when it comes to Chinese money that of dubious origin that has parked itself in Australia.
This is where some of that Chinese money has landed in Australia. Ever since the White Shoe Brigade of developers descended on its long, glistening beaches 5 decades ago, the Gold Coast has been a magnet for big money. Here, McMansions line man-made canals, while gleaming mega towers cast their shadows over entire suburbs.
There's a range of characters on the coast. They range from the corporate rascals through down to the street rascals.
This strip of sun, sand and steel is private investigator Jason McFettridge's beat.
You'd be very careful who you're dealing with on the coast and make sure that you do your thorough checks and background checks who you're dealing with, because you can go pear-shaped very easily.
McFettridge, or Ferg to his colleagues, is kept busy with investigations into business fraud and custody disputes. Run-of-the-mill stuff for the former New Zealand plainclothes detective.
You've got the ethnic groups, you've got the bikie gangs, you've got the fraudsters that are running scams on the coast, and they can be everyday people. And it's hard to decipher which is legit and which is not legit. Hence why I get a lot of work.
Last year, McFettridge got a call from a contact working with China's Public Security Bureau with the offer of an unusual mission. It would be later codenamed Project Dragon. And what's the mission? What's it about?
The mission is basically asset recovery of funds that have been filtered in from China to Australia, and making inquiries there to unravel what's actually occurred.
McFettridge's contact worked for Caruso and Associates, a legal firm with offices in China, Hong Kong and the US. In a letter to McFettridge, Caruso and Associates said it had been appointed by the government of the People's Republic of China to undertake investigations and asset recovery operations, targeting Chinese individuals or entities complicit in the alleged misappropriation of funds from China and the diversion of those funds to other countries. Caruso and Associates told the ex-cop that millions had been taken out of China, ending up in assets owned by an Australian company called Cap Chevron. What's he want you to do?
Basically make some inquiries into Cap Chevron, do some searches, try and locate the people involved, and go from there.
To help him, McFetridge brought in a trusted and well-credentialed colleague.
Ferg approached me because of my background to see if I might be able to assist him, conduct those inquiries.
The information the two former cops got about the alleged dirty money was scant.
It was just that the money had been misappropriated in China and invested into Australia. But the detail of how and the where of how the money was obtained in China wasn't available to us at the early stage.
If we go back up the chain, aren't you effectively working for the Chinese government? Are you comfortable with that?
No, we're not working directly for the Chinese government. In this case, the Chinese government has entered a public-private partnership with a Chinese company to which they are close, who has the mandate to recover money that's been unlawfully shifted out of China. And they're simply engaging with EMDA in Hong Kong to provide some expertise, some investigative resources to help them do that. And again, as I said, the agenda simply is to help, stop the cash flow washing out of their economy.
Why do you think the Chinese want to use ex-law enforcement officials from, say, Australia?
It makes it more streamlined. We're dealing with Chinese in Australia. We reside in Australia. It makes it a bit more professional when you're dealing with Australian law, court matters, that type of thing. And we have a certain way of dealing with people.
And you're comfortable working with Chinese authorities?
So far, it's been no problem at all.
This is fairly unprecedented, where you've got one state employing people in other jurisdictions, particularly with the skills and background that these people have. Certainly haven't come across it before.
The company that McFetridge and Whittaker were asked to investigate, Cap Chevron, was registered to an office at this address, 50 Cavill Avenue in the heart of Surfers Paradise.
There are 3 directors of Cap Chevron, and at that stage, one was living in Australia, and the other 2, unknowns to me, were living in China, based in China.
Cap Chevron's owners and 2 of its directors were Chinese citizens, Bobo Wang and Winston Wang. The 3rd director was Sherry Zhao, an Australian resident who works as a real estate agent on the Gold Coast.
Okay, right now we're actually on Chevron Island. It's an island located right behind Surfers Paradise. There's canals, rivers around it. It's a lovely area.
When McFetridge and his partner Whittaker set out to investigate Cap Chevron, they discovered that Wang and Wang had spent $11.5 million on a piece of real estate on the Gold Coast, Chevron Island. The property came with council approval for a proposed 18-storey residential and commercial tower.
We're approaching actually the site, which is just down here, and if you want to see where $11.5 million went, it's right in front of us.
There were other curious questions about the deal. Wang and Wang paid $11.5 million for the site in the heart of the Gold Coast. They then leased it back for just $100 a year to the real estate agency that brokered the deal and who had offices on the site.
The term of the lease was 5 years with a 5-year option to renew. So effectively 10 years of lease is $1,000.
So the lessees, in your opinion, got a very good deal?
It's a great deal.
Chinese corporate documents show the money flowed from China through a company called Hangzhou Liao, meaning Hangzhou, come to Australia. This Chinese provincial government permit allowed it to move a total of $14 million into an Australian company called Cap Developments. It was owned by Bobo Wang and Winston Wang. How hard is it to get approval to take that money out of China to invest in, say, Gold Coast real estate?
It is significantly difficult, if not impossible, I would suggest. You would have to get approval at very senior levels to move that level of money.
Wang & Wang's main fund in China spruiked the benefits of the Gold Coast development on its website. and invited investors to come on board, promising hefty returns. Legal experts question whether this is permitted because private funds in China are not allowed to advertise publicly for investors.
In relation to the high-rise development they proposed in Queensland, if they put advertisement over the internet to say you invest money into that project, theoretically in China that is breach law.
Daniel Shen specialises in commercial litigation, acting for Chinese clients who want to make large real estate investments in Australia. Wang & Weng's fund told would-be investors that a $1.5 million deposit in their company could secure them an Australian visa, which they claimed would be an easy step to Australian permanent residency.
In relation to the advertisement to say, as far as you invest like 1.5 million Australian dollars, then we can secure a permanent residentship. I do not believe that is possible. That is not true, and that is illegal. You cannot say this.
The time had come for Jason McFetridge and Austin Whitaker to act, to launch their mission to get control of the property.
It's hard to tell whether it's legit or not legit, and that's the issue we have at the moment.
The plan is audacious, to get the owners of a multi-million-dollar Gold Coast property to simply give it up, hand it over. So is this even legal? As former detectives, McFetridge and Whitaker insist they know the law and are operating within it. They say they're simply persuading the directors of Cap Chevron to own up and see sense.
Our plan was to speak to the directors, tell them who we're working with, what we're doing, get them to agree and come on board. From there, we can, sign the company over, we can sell it, recuperate the losses, and return the money back to China. Everyone's happy. That was the basic plan.
And that's a legal plan?
It's a legal plan. There's no dramas. As long as someone consents to it, you're not breaking the law. If someone tells me to go away, I have to go away.
Are these ex-law enforcement officers putting themselves at any risk, do you believe, by operating in Australia for the Chinese government?
I think they have to tread carefully. One of the challenges they've got is that they need to walk a very, very narrow line.
Their first step was to approach Cap Chevron's Australian director, Sherry Zhao.
So the strategy that we developed was that Ferg would seek to interview Sherry and see whether she was willing to resign as a director and transfer the shares. Because our ultimate objective was to seek to sell the property and repatriate the funds back to China.
So what's your objective with your meeting with Sherry Zhao?
The objective is to tell Sherry we can resolve this matter when you do help, because as it stands, she's the front person for this company. She's put no money into it. She's just a front because she lives in Australia.
Sherry Zhao later recounted in an affidavit in Supreme Court hearings how Jason McFetridge made his initial approach. He had my mobile phone number. I didn't particularly want to meet with him. He told me he knew where I lived, knew where my children went to school, and knew where my husband worked. I found this intimidating. Mr. McFetridge suggested that he would come to my home in the evening, after I told him I was busy with work during office hours. Because I didn't want Mr. McFetridge coming to my house, I agreed to attend a meeting with him at a coffee shop at a shopping centre at Helensvale. I attended the meeting alone.
This is Westfield Helensvale Shopping Centre. This is where I arranged a meeting with Sherry at a local cafe.
This meeting with Sherry Zhao would be crucial if the plan was to succeed.
Ferg advised her that his opinion was that she was not a key player and that if she did want to get out, then he had the mechanism by which she could resign.
And telling her this is serious. You know, it can affect things with you going forward. If you go to China, it can affect you.
In her affidavit, Sherry Zhao says she felt scared during the meeting. Mr McFetridge went on to tell me that he had been appointed as an agent for Shenzhen Bank on behalf of the Chinese government to repatriate monies illegally moved out of China. Mr McFetridge suggested that I may be in trouble with the Chinese government, and if I had been in China, I would have been taken to jail. I was feeling frightened at that stage. Mr McFetridge suggested that I had to resign as a director of Cap Chevron to stay out of trouble, and so he could protect me.
I had a co-worker with me at the meeting, a female worker, to make her a bit more relaxed. So there's two of us at the meeting. We had a coffee, we had a drink of water, we talked for over 40 minutes. She was never threatened, never coerced, never at all.
The feedback I had from Ferg and the other two people who were there was that Sherry was initially apprehensive, which is understandable, but during the course of that interview indicated that really she didn't have any equity in the property, that her role was essentially to be the nominee director, and that really she just wanted to get out of the situation.
McFetridge claims that Sherry Zhao, realising who she was dealing with at the meeting, decided she wanted nothing more to do with Cap Chevron.
She doesn't want to be involved anymore, she wants out. And I then told her a plan how we can do that to resolve it and keep her out of the trouble. We had a document written up through our legal consultancy in relation to the directors of Cap Chevron resigning, wanting out. She was happy to get the matter resolved. She didn't want to be in trouble, she wanted out, she wanted her family safe and didn't want to be involved at all.
According to McFetridge and Whittaker and her own affidavit, Sherry Zhao signed the papers resigning her directorship. How are you feeling at this point? It's all going to plan, I suppose.
We were happy that we'd executed the part that we needed to execute in Australia, and at that stage we felt that that would hold up.
Sherry, Mark Willacy from Four Corners. Could I just ask you a couple of questions about Cap Chevron?
Sherry Zhao declined to be interviewed by Four Corners, but we caught up with her near her real estate office on Chevron Island.
What was the meeting like? Was it intimidating, or how did you feel at the meeting?
I'm feeling no good.
Yeah?
Because that guy is trying to scare me.
He tried to scare you?
Yeah, I talking that one to my lawyer.
Yep.
And we called the police. I think he's still no real.
Do you know where the money came from China to buy Cap Chevron? To buy the property, buy Cap Chevron?
I don't know, because I'm Asian. I just do that. Yeah.
So who asked you to be a director of the company?
Because that Bobo is my friend, so he just wants a local director. I said, okay, I do that.
There's allegations that the money was illegally taken out of China.
It's legal.
It's legal or illegal or legal?
It's by law.
Text messages sent just a few days after the meeting revealed that Sherry Zhao helped Jason McFetridge with crucial information, including telephone and address details for her fellow Cap Chevron directors. This is Bo Wong Chinese mobile number. Maybe you need. Just sent to you in case. Thanks, Sherry. That's really great. With this information, the next phase of the takeover plan could begin.
The documents from there were sent back to China for them to be executed over there, for the other directors to be located and signed as well.
Whittaker and McFetridge now needed to get the other two directors, the China-based Wang and Weng, to also resign from Cap Chevron. And within weeks, the documents had been returned to the Gold Coast with what appeared to be Wang and Weng's signatures confirming their resignation from the company.
Are you comfortable with how those signatures were obtained in China?
Absolutely.
So no coercion or compulsion used?
No, well, I wouldn't think so. It's not. I don't know for sure. But in the day, they were signed, and it's a good result.
Having removed the three Chinese directors, Jason McFetridge submitted documents to ASIC, which made him the sole director and owner of Cap Chevron.
And the plan was at that stage, my company will come in, take ownership of the company of Cap Chevron, and from there we can, facilitate the sale of the property.
McFetridge was set to sell up the property and send the proceeds to China, and to pocket his commission. But he was in for a rude shock. One evening, the former detective found a package sitting on his doorstep.
Picked up an envelope and it was court documents suing me and alleging me committing fraud in relation to Cap Chevron. And it was a thick document, and I thought, well, this is what's going on here. This is not right, because whatever I've done, it's legit, above board.
So they've hit back hard, basically accusing Ferg and your team essentially of fraud, forgery, and of threatening people.
And yeah, coercion, intimidation, a whole range of sort of unsavoury behaviours that just isn't how we operate. You know.
The case launched by Bobo Wang and Winston Weng in Brisbane Supreme Court accused Jason McFetridge of misleading and deceptive conduct.
Wang and Weng's lawyers told the Supreme Court that the documents used by the former cop to gain control of the company were the result of either fraud or forgery, or both, and that Wang and Weng had never resigned as directors. They demanded to be reinstated and their ownership of Cap Chevron restored, and they wanted damages awarded against McFetridge.
Wang and Weng say they never resigned as directors, that you were never appointed as a director, and that you engaged in fraud and forgery. What's your response to that?
Well, that's wrong for a start, because when we got the documents back from China, we went through the right procedures with ASIC to get it changed over, get Cap Chevron changed and turned over into my company's name. So it was all done by the book, on advice from our legal counsel.
But you don't know what happened at the Chinese end, though, do you? Whether that was done officially and properly with Wang and Weng?
I'm just going on what the documents we got. So I presume it was all done properly. That's out of my hands, you know what I mean? I presume it was done professionally and done properly.
McFetridge was advised by his contact in China and his lawyer not to contest the case. The Supreme Court ruled that the former detective had never been validly appointed as a director or shareholder of Cap Chevron, and that Wang, Weng and Sherry Zhao had at all times been the lawful directors. The court restrained McFetridge from selling the property.
Wang, Weng and Sherry Zhao, they've won the case. It looks like you and your team are breaking the law. What's your response to that?
Well, clearly we're not breaking the law. We sought to execute a process that involved the agreement and cooperation of the three parties, and they initially cooperated, and at some later point changed their mind about cooperations.
We complied with what they wanted. What they wanted was the Cap Chevron be returned back to Cap Chevron directors, the Chinese directors, and that we resign, and we signed that.
We just wanted to focus on continuing the investigation, not fighting a legal case that may go either way, as court cases often do. We thought, well, we'll just step back. We may have lost that battle, but the war is not over.
"10 days ago, a Queensland police detective visited Jason McFetridge at home, acting on a complaint from Bobo Wang. McFetridge says police told him it was alleged that he'd intimidated Sherry Zhao. The police have told Four Corners they're still investigating the matter.
We've had legal advice along the whole way. Before I do anything, we get legal advice to make sure we're within the boundaries of the law, and see how, and make sure it's thorough what we're doing.
Sherry Zhao resigned as a director of Cap Chevron last year. Bobo Wang and Winston Weng are back in charge of the company and the $11.5 million property. Through a Chinese interpreter, Four Corners contacted Bobo Wang on the phone in China. She did not want to speak to us.
She hung up the phone.
A spokeswoman for Bobo Wang told Four Corners the Gold Coast property was bought with Wang and Weng's personal money. She denied any illicit funds were used. She says neither the Chinese Public Security Bureau or any other agency has contacted Wang about the deal, and that Wang denies ever advertising to potential investors. And she says Wang wants police to investigate what she calls McFetrich's fraudulent claims, saying they've caused her and Wang huge losses.
There's nothing wrong with hiring consultants, and people do it in any country. And where it becomes a little murkier is when you start stepping beyond those normal roles on instruction from a foreign government.
So why is China using private operatives when it has a cooperation agreement with the Australian Federal Police? 3 months ago, the AFP smashed an alleged money laundering scheme by Chinese nationals, seizing $8.5 million worth of property. It appears China is running a two-track strategy.
What I think we are seeing with the use of covert operations and former law enforcement operatives is a willingness to try every means possible, regardless of the impact of that. Whether that's frustration, whether that's desperation, or whether that's the Chinese authorities simply looking at another angle to apply pressure to bring this money back.
So from the Chinese perspective, hiring these guys is quite a smart move.
Absolutely.
Despite losing the court case, the Gold Coast ex-cops say they have been told to keep pursuing the Cap Chevron money. And there are fresh targets in sight. Bill Micah has been brought in to breathe new life into Project Dragon.
Bill has a lot of clout. He knows a lot of high-ranking officials in China.
So Bill's the heavy hitter you need.
He is a heavy hitter.
Bill and his company are essentially instructing us as their Australian arm on the asset recovery operations in Australia. So Bill's coordinating at the Chinese end, we're coordinating investigations at the Australian end.
We're not going to get involved or do something that is going to put us offside with the police in the jurisdictions we operate in. We don't want to be offside. We want to do it properly. We don't need to see a story in the front page of the newspaper where somebody took a shortcut.
This team of private operatives believes they're onto a winner with Project Dragon, and a lucrative one for them. They say they've identified $80 million worth of property on the Gold Coast that they suspect has been bought with laundered cash by other Chinese nationals. And if it does involve dirty money, they want to help get it back to China.
There's what we're referring to as a cluster of properties at Sovereign Island. Most of them, or all of them, waterfront, luxuriously appointed, all vacant. It's very early days for us with that set of properties, and we'll be doing some work on that.
Information I've received through our realtors is that they find a property, they like it, they sign a sale or purchase, and they buy the property with a large amount of cash. They bring in a briefcase full of cash.
I see us in a growth industry. I see there being a need to hire other former law enforcement from various backgrounds of law enforcement in Australia to assist us, because definitely the problem isn't going away, and the magnitude of the need is not diminishing. If anything, it's expanding.